Hello, good evening, good day, good morning, good night, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. My name is David O'Regan. I'm a cardiac surgeon in Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, and I'm also the director of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers for the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. I'd like to thank you, my followers, for reaching more than 2,500 and for the 1,500 likes. Lessons reached 205,000 people over the last month, and I'm delighted in your responses and feedback. Thank you very much indeed. The whole essence of this series of the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills is to focus on feel. But before I go into that, I wanted to share with you an article I saw in Surgeons News this week. And this was from a junior plastic surgical trainee in Hull, Parisa Mori, and the consultant Shafiq Rahman. And I'm always looking for models that we can use at home to practice surgical techniques. And I thought their model was particularly innovative. And what we have here is a diagram where they've used sugar strings. These are candy strings with an outer coating and an inner white coating. And they've used it on a mock-up on a chopping board for a tendon repair. And I thought that was extremely innovative and very careful. And these are two edible strawberry laces. And it allows for good visualization and suture placement. And the material is sturdy, yet requires careful handling, because if you pull too hard or tighten the knots too hard, it pulls out. So as a model, I thought this was excellent. And that's the whole idea about what we are trying to do with the Black Belt Academy, is talk about feel and appreciate your tools to make your surgery respect the tissue. And this evening, we're going to talk about forceps. Now, forceps are really an extension of the fingers. And if you want to hold something gently, you can't beat your fingers. Indeed, some of the trainers I worked with used to insist that we hold the long venous vein or radial artery conduit between our fingers rather than with a pair of forceps. The fear is that with a pair of forceps, you're liable to crush or injure the vessel. So very often with some fine work, simply using your fingers is the best form of forceps you can use. And you know that because you can gently touch your forearm, the lightest of touches, and appreciate the feel. But forceps should be used in a similar manner. And I'm going to take you over to the webcam and point out some of the common errors in holding forceps and how to use them, and then take you through some tools and models you can adopt at home to help you practice and improve your accuracy, precision, and feel using the forceps. So here we come to the webcam. So there are many types of forceps, but the important thing is how you hold them. Now, very often people take a pair of forceps and hold them as if they're using tongs to flip salad or flip burgers on a barbecue. No, okay? And certainly bigger versions of this were just bought for the kitchen to turn chicken over or things over in a hot frying pan. But that's not how you hold forceps. The other common way people use forceps is to hold them like a pen, gripping like that and flexing the distal interphalangeal joints. And you can see here, as I did on the poster, my fingernail blanches at the end and the palps of my finger blanch as well. Relax, blanch, relax, blanch. And that really is indicating to me that I'm putting too much pressure on the forceps. Why? In this position, I'm actually using these two big muscles of the forearm. Flexor pollicis longus, that sits on the radius in the interosseous membrane, and flexor digitorum profundus, which again sits on the ulna and the interosseous membrane. And these are the two biggest muscles of the forearm. And this is the Popeye muscles, but these enable rock climbers to literally hang by the fingertips. They are that powerful because they flex the DIP joints and enable you to support your body weight literally on the tip of your fingers. And that pen position is bringing to bear these muscles and that pressure, which is fine if you're holding a pen and delineating letters across the page with the movement of your finger and your wrist. But that's not what we want to do to tissues. We want to be able to feel our tissues and feel the instrument. And therefore would recommend that you put the forceps in the cradle of your hand between your thumb and your forefinger, and you keep the DIP joint extended. And why that is important, because the muscle that actually does that, the four peculiar muscles of the hand, the lumbricals, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they arise from the flexor retinaculum and the flexor digitorum profundus, and their tendons extend to the extensor surface of the DIP joint, and that actually extends the fingers. That is the lumbrical movement. And because they're small muscles, and because they do not have any bony origin, you can't, by definition, put the same power into it as the two muscles of the forearm. And these are the intrinsic muscles of the hand, peculiar because they don't have any bony insertion or origin. So in doing that, you see what I'm doing. I am bringing then the pulp of my finger and my thumb in maximal contact with the forceps as I caress the forceps. And the simple movement is like that. Now, you can't apply much pressure, but as pounds per square inch, because I am in UK and we're not metric on that, you think the amount of force in that small area can still do a lot of damage. So there are two types of forceps. One, non-tooth forceps, and these are called DeBakey. He's a Lebanese American surgeon who is a well-renowned scientist, innovator, teacher, and developed this instrument. And it's got on one side a single row of fine tooth forceps, fine tooth, and on the other side a double row of fine teeth. And you can see that if I actually squeeze a bit of putty and take it out, and you can see the two rows there. And it's larger DeBakey forceps like that. It's the same again. There are two rows of interdigitating fine teeth, and you can see the fine teeth there. And these are non-crushing forceps and are not going to do any damage provided they're used properly. The other form of forceps, these are Adsense forceps, and this is named after a neurosurgeon. And while this neurosurgeon was using tooth forceps, I don't know if it was to pick your brain, excuse the pun, but the idea is you've got one tooth interdigitating with two teeth, and if I put that on this bit of putty here, squeeze again, and you will see that I've got two teeth there and one tooth there. And that is, these teeth are actually quite sharp. But the neurosurgeon who designed this wasn't using this to grab the tissue, was using this to reflect the tissue. And I recall working with Mr. Lincoln at the Brompton Hospital, and he was using smaller ring tip forceps with teeth on it, but he would never touch the endothelium of the coronary vessel. But very often we are using these forceps and tooth forceps on the skin. But you can see here what damage this has done to the spinana. On this side is the tooth forceps using regular pressure, and you can see the teeth mark made as I try to evert the skin edges or grab it. On this side, I've used crushing forceps. And again, you can see the scratch marks and this crushing damage. And we know from histological studies, we see the same on vessels, on the intima, and we see this on the mucosa in the bowel and ureters. And the important thing is, when holding tissue, is to hold it lightly, and on vessels, hold the adventitia, and also on bowel, hold the adventitia. When it comes to the skin, my plastic surgical colleagues would use a skin hook, and that's what I've used along here. You can see a skin hook enables you to lift it up quite easily without damaging the skin. See that? And they use skin hooks all the time to minimize trauma to the skin, because this is actually breaching the integument and allowing possible infection. So the purist would say use the skin hook to lift the skin, or rather than grab it, again, simply use the hook on your tooth forceps to do the same, to lift it up. But that is the potential damage that you're going to do. So the first use of the forceps is to pick things up. And a simple model to use at home is, can you pick up grains of rice and put them in a spoon? And you notice I'm picking up, I've actually got my pinky extended almost as a bit of scaffolding and giving me a degree of stability as well. All right. Now with this rice, if I actually grab too hard in the wrong position, it usually skids off. And that is good practice to pick it up gently and deliberately. To make it more complicated and to actually introduce a bit of fun, take a number of spoons and arrange them 1, 2, 3, 4, with a spoon in the middle, and now a friend or a recording of 1, 2, 3, 4 at different pace, pick up the rice, 2, 3, 1, 4, and do it with your right and left hand. So you're practicing, because as when assisting, you'll be doing it with your right and the left hand. And the important thing is to pick up accuracy. Now you can make a game of this and mix the rice. So you can say black 1, white rice 3, 2, etc. And you can build the speed on that and have a game, and even put forfeits to this if you want, and practice. But to get more refined and more accurate in your practice and being deliberate and being able to pick up and point, another way of doing it is taking a bendy straw, putting it on a bit of blue tack on a plate. You can have different colors and different diameters. These are straight. And again, practice picking the rice up and dropping it in the straw. Now, the thing about the thin straws is that you're going to have to move your wrist around to orientate the longitudinal axis so it drops down the rice. And each time you do this, again, you can have a competition and make this fun. I'm not sure if you've seen that game, Simon Says, where the colors come on in different sequences. You can do the same with this in calling out orange, purple, yellow, green, and putting the rice in each of the holes. Again, and just 5-10 minutes every day will improve your accuracy in practice. So what we're doing here is practicing the accuracy of pointing and holding. And as I've indicated, your little finger can balance on the outside to give you that stability. But the important thing is you never squeeze the forceps, and we don't see blanching of your fingernails as you see there. So the other common problem I see with forceps, and particularly when we come to stitching, is the drift. So what I've noticed when people are focusing on stitching with their right hand, and you'll know from our stitching exercises, we've been practicing this with our non-dominant hand behind the back, and we don't have to rehearse that today. But as soon as we introduce a forceps, I find that the stitching goes awry, but as people concentrate, and this is a fiver, as the people concentrate on the stitching, they're not thinking of what the left hand is doing. So what I've done here is put some staples in this banana model, and as I'm going round and thinking about it, I need to actually stitch as previously said. Now I'm combining the exercises, but as I'm concentrating on my right hand, I do not want my left hand to grab and pull the staple out. And I want to be able to hold that gently and keep that in position as I go round. And by positioning your staples all the way around, you can actually hold as if you're holding or retracting tissue to enable you to place and take your sutures. And the important thing is, I don't want to see this grabbing too hard, and I do not want to see the drift. The two common errors that I see when using the forceps. And they're potentially dangerous and sharp. And to suddenly just stick it in soft tissue, you see, it's a spear. It can spear a tissue. That might be lung, that might be liver, that might be kidney, might be spleen. And therefore, just be careful of inadvertent movement as well. Extending this model, I was thinking, well, a simple exercise to do is literally put staples around the hole and see if you can move deliberately to each one of the staples without picking it up like that. Let's put it in again. So you've got to move deliberately to each staple, and again you can number the sequence and perhaps number them as a clock, but I've got 8 here. Pick it up and literally hold it. And what you're doing is training yourself not only to be accurate, but to avoid that drift. And again, practice with your left hand. So you're not pulling it out or grabbing it inadvertently or drifting. Okay, so again, this is not only focusing the accuracy, but preventing the drift. And it's keeping your fingers straight and caressing the instrument all the time. As I said previously, Lloyd Moynihan describes that we should be caressing our tissues, and that comes from caressing the instruments rather than being a hewer of flesh. So as I was thinking this afternoon about what to add and how to build on this feel element, I thought to myself, what about wet tissue paper and putting some tea on it and saying, can I pick up this wet tissue paper lightly and peel it back in its layers without actually tearing it or grabbing it and pulling it? And this again gives you practice on lightness of touch and lifting. And I thought, see there, it's starting to tilt, but if I want to peel off large bits, I need to practice lifting this gently and pulling this off in sheets. And again, if you're too rough, this wet tissue paper will easily tear, and if I grab it too hard, it'll easily tear as well. And as a model, I think this works quite nicely at home to practice your lightness of touch. So as previously, not only are we focusing on your accuracy by picking up the rice, we're wanting to pick wet tissue paper up, and I tried it this afternoon and I found it very difficult, and that's what I think we need with models we practice with. They need to be difficult and challenge your skills. So when you get to the real thing, you'll find it a lot easier. See how much of this you can pick up and move around. So I thought that was interesting. And I've just spotted my bit of proline here on the side, which reminds me to tell you, please do not ever grab a suture with your forceps, all right? Because this particular monofilament is essentially plastic. And I hope I've demonstrated the damage that can be done by the forceps. And if I grab it hard or inadvertently, I can see it with naked eye. I'm not sure you can see it on the camera. You can see the plastic itself has been bent and is blanched at that point. And what you've done, I probably can't because it's a foro, what you've done is actually weakened the suture, and that could possibly break or come undone. So please, this is a never, ever grab the suture like that, because without due care and attention, this is the sort of damage that can do inside and out. Look at the inside damage there as well with the forceps. Imagine if that was a bowel mucosa. And we know from scientific papers and demonstrated histological damage. So your outcomes as surgery really boils down to the fundamental principles on how well you use your instruments, the lightness of touch, and the feel. Your outcomes, whether it be wound infection, vascular anastomosis, bowel anastomosis, will require you to appreciate that lightness of touch. The two important elements that I see with forceps is the squeeze, drift, and drag. And the elements and models that I've used this evening will hopefully give you an opportunity to practice to remove those two elements of poor forceps control. I hope this has made sense to you. Please send comments, add likes, circulate it to your friends, and I hope to see you again next week, where we're going to address assisting again and the theme of feel. The following week, we're going to address an important part of surgery, going back to the very basics of Black Belt Academy, and that is your posture. That is our forthcoming attractions. I hope you can join me next week. Wherever you've joined me from, thank you very much. Be safe. Thank you for the likes, and thank you to all my followers. I'd like to see examples of your practice at home and photographs as well. Thank you to Kine and Harris for sending me their pictures and all the comments and support. I say thank you to my trainer, Mr. Cherian, and I know my fellow sensei, Chris Caddy in Sheffield, may be looking too, and he always gives me feedback on these lessons. Good night, be safe, and thank you.